You're somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Exact location is classified. You stand in the control room of a destroyer, where orders have been given to fire the ship's naval strike missile.
Naval strike missile.
Naval strike missile armed.
Green range, clear to fire.
The missile alone weighs hundreds of kilograms and will travel at high subsonic speeds. No chance to get this wrong.
Command approved. Naval strike missile.
The captain hands you the two-way radio. Relaying the final message to US range is up to you, a former Irish dancer from the western suburbs of Sydney. As the reverberations ripple through the ship's steel, you wonder, how did I get here?
Ashleigh Hain enjoys crochet, long-distance running, and is a skilled Irish dancer. She's also a communication systems sailor in the Royal Australian Navy. We just caught a glimpse into her mind as she helped test a guided missile in US waters aboard the new HMAS Sydney. I'm your host, Nick Musgrove. I'm a film and TV writer, and this is How Did I Get Here?, a podcast about incredible stories in the ADF. So how did an Irish dancer jig her way aboard a naval destroyer? Let's find out. Ashleigh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So great to have you in. So I'm so interested. So this missile is going to be tested and you're a communications expert. You found yourself in somewhere a little bit unusual that day, didn't you?
I did. So the usual workspace that I work in is within a bit of a close range from where the missile takes off from. So sometimes you look at things and you're like, is it worth someone's safety or their hearing in the long run? So they did move us from my usual workspace into the operations room on board HMAS Sydney. So it just so happened that I was standing at a particular desk that we manned during certain times, which was near the phone next to the captain in his important chair, and I ended up on the phone with the US range person, like this big important person, and little old able seaman Ashleigh Hain at the time. So it's very exciting for me.
So obviously it's quite potentially dangerous, or you need to take safety precautions to avoid danger. And is everyone called to action stations? Is it like in the movies when a test like this is happening?
Most of our firings on different types of weapons do go to action stations. So imagine exactly how the movies play out, except we've practiced it so many times, I would say hundreds of times in the lead up to these exercises or firings in particular. So there is no stress for majority of the people. No one's in a certain rush. It's like muscle memory in those circumstances. However, this one, it was a very big moment because we hadn't fired that weapon from the ship before. So you cross your fingers and hope that everything goes to plan, and it did on the day, thankfully.
So you have drilled and trained for action station scenarios. Does that involve getting the call in the middle of the night, sirens blaring, action stations are called? Is that how you train?
Absolutely. So middle of the night, middle of the day, from being fast asleep in your pajamas in your rack, that's what we call a bed, to having to be fully dressed at a certain location within 6 minutes. But there's 200 odd people doing that, so you can imagine stairways, hallways get quite busy. So you have to think kind of like a beehive, like a hive mind, and work with each other and not get pushy. Everyone's tired. You just get where you need to get to and do what you got to do.
Are there rules or etiquette when so many people are moving, presumably often through narrow corridors or spaces? Are there rules to help you navigate all of that?
It's kind of like driving a car, how there's like the 1-for-1 rule. You try your best to stick to it. Don't make someone wait too long. Take turns. At the end of the day, you're going to spend another few weeks or months with these people, so don't anger anyone. Yeah.
But let's talk more about your time as a kid. So you actually moved around quite a lot growing up, is that right?
Yeah, mainly around the Sydney area. I'm a Sydney local. I learnt to drive in like the outer suburbs of Sydney, so quite familiar with the traffic and, just getting where you need to with enough time. But it's a good area to grow up in.
And after school, you enrolled in TAFE to study screen and media. I'm really interested in what drove you in that regard.
During the last years of high school, I bounced from idea to idea to idea. One week I wanted to be a high school art teacher. The next week I wanted to be a hairdresser. Just trying to think of something that I could do long term that I would enjoy, not just something to pay the bills, but something that I liked doing every day. So I think I went to TAFE kind of as an in-between. I was working in a cinema at the time for a few years, went to TAFE, did interactive digital media. So this podcast set up at the moment, I did learn a little bit about it, although on the other side of it, and then got into the Navy in an interesting way. So, yeah.
So there's clearly a performative side of you, Ashleigh, between your dancing at school and then what you studied at TAFE. Were you worried that there wouldn't be a place for that side of you in the ADF?
I think you always worry if there's a spot for you in any environment you go into. The great thing about the ADF is that we have so many different people. We have so many skills, so many talents that you'll meet someone and you could know them for 3 years and not know that their primary hobby is their primary hobby, and then be wowed by their talents that they've got. So I think maybe there are some worries in the initial interviews you do that am I what they're looking for? But once you're in, you're like, okay, I can make space for myself here.
Ashleigh, let's talk about the day you decided to join the ADF. You're 19 years old. Where were you?
I was at my hometown of Mittagong at the time, kind of small little town, just at Anzac Day in the morning parade. And I was watching my brother, who was in the Air Cadets at the time, actually march. So Mum and I were standing there on the sidelines watching and giving our respects.
And what struck you about the march that really captured your imagination?
So there was a contingent from one of the Navy bases there marching, which later on I would come to find out is quite a common occurrence as well. But there was Navy sailors marching there, and I kind of turned to Mum and said, do you reckon I could do that? Do you think I could be in the Navy, be a sailor? And we kind of talked about it over the week following, and then, within 7 days, had my application in online. So pretty quick turnaround there.
So you obviously have a really close relationship with your mum, and her opinion really mattered in terms of what you did then.
Yeah, it still does. Yeah, so it was just Mum, my brother and I at the time. So heavily relied on Mum, and she's always looked after us. So I have a lot of respect for my mother. I call her almost every day still.
But she did approve of what you were thinking of at that time?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd talked with her throughout high school every time I changed ideas on what I wanted to do as a career. So we kind of settled on it as this could be a long-term career, something that I would enjoy. And I had no idea what it would entail at the time, but I was more right than I knew at the time as well.
Do you remember the first day that you actually went out to sea?
I've been to sea quite a few times now, and always the first day out is always quite exciting. Some people think, it's, the same thing every time. But as a communications specialist, I could be on the bridge when we're leaving one day. I could be out on what we call the flag deck, where, funnily enough, all the flags are located. I could be on the bow of the ship taking down the Australian flag, hoping to not fall in the water, which is pretty terrifying.
Are you a good swimmer, Ashleigh?
I am quite the average swimmer.
And that's okay in the Navy?
It is. So we do a swim test during the recruit training, which you kind of just have to pass once and then you're good to go. You don't really ever have to do that swim test again.
And so talk to me about your role more generally.
So within the Navy, it's known as a communication system sailor. I look after a team that looks after the communications coming in and out of the ship. So I mainly work in the satellite space. So it's something I'm hoping to get more into down the track as well. But radios, flags, Morse code, flashing light, we do all of that. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So obviously some of those are quite, not antiquated, but have been part of how the Navy has communicated for a long time. Do they still get used, like flags or Morse?
They do. It is kind of a common thing to think that like Morse code that's like on the black and white movies, what do you mean you still use it? But if you're in an environment where you can't use satellites or radios as well, it is good because it can be done almost silently, except for the sound of the shutters, like clicking. It can be done almost silently. So it's a good way for ships to communicate with each other.
So are the shutters, is that how you're actually doing Morse, or is that separate to light signals?
That's how you're doing Morse, yeah. So big like lights, about 10 inches in diameter, and they got kind of, imagine your Venetian shutters on the front of it and a handle on the side, and you click, 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 or dit-da, as we like to say in the Navy. So, yeah, it's commonly used quite often.
So as a communications specialist, it seems quite apt, even though you say it was coincidental, that you were standing next to the captain and communicating with US Range Command during a weapons test. It would have required so much composure and confidence. Were you always that calm and confident as a kid growing up?
Oh my goodness, no, absolutely not. I mean, you did introduce me as an Irish dancer, so I have been up on stage in front of a lot of people, but it's kind of easy when you don't know who those people watching you are, whereas on a Navy ship, you know the other 200 odd people that are there with you, or in the operations room at the time, it probably would have been about 100 of us. So I think it's a lot of nerves, a lot of excitement. You're doing something that's just exhilarating, and there's a lot of pressure of like, don't stuff it up, or don't say the wrong thing, but you've kind of got to not question yourself. At the end of the day, you kind of just have to almost switch off and go into an auto mode of, yep, perfect, I can repeat that.
Talk to me about the moment you were posted to the new HMAS Sydney.
Funnily enough, we didn't have a ship yet. So we
How does
were
that
a
work?
team. We were a team working out of a building within Sydney known as New Ship Sydney. That's what ships are called before HMAS. So we did different training courses. I myself got to go and do a course overseas, went to San Diego for almost a month for work. Didn't have to sail, got to fly and stay in one of the US Navy bases for that. Yeah.
So all the while the new ship Sydney is being built, is anticipation growing amongst your team as it nears completion?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it pretty much, if you saw it, it looked like it was ready to sail. However, all the internals hadn't quite been done yet. When you look at like a house being built, kind of a similar thing. A lot goes into building ships, but yeah, during that wait, I got to sail on sister ship HMAS Hobart, so kind of learnt the ship as well. They're almost identical. So when Sydney finally arrived, it was like I knew it already, but it has its own personality, each ship, in exactly how things work, or some slight differences that, yeah, you learn over a few years.
One of my favourite smells is new car. Is there a new ship smell?
Kind of think of new car smell with the bonnet open, like you get like the mechanic type of smell. Much the same as that.
So it must have been so exciting. Was there a whole heap of new technology to play with as well?
There was. And technology that you can't ever imagine yourself in the lead up to these things ever getting to use or play with. Like, if you talked to 15-year-old me, I would not be sitting there thinking I'm going to be playing with Navy radios or on a naval bridge in X many years' time, and now look at me. It's like, oh, it's easy. Radios, perfect. Satellites, wonderful. Yeah, it's something that you don't expect yourself doing, and working with those technologies that you don't even know exist that just become everyday use. It's interesting, it's fun, it's something new all the time.
So from your perspective as someone in communications, are people able to freely communicate using Messenger or WhatsApp and Wi-Fi? Or does it all go through the communications team? How does it work when you're at sea?
So it's transformed even whilst I've been in the Navy in 10 years. We do have Wi-Fi on ships at the moment. So it can be turned off if needed, if we're going to particular areas where we need to keep a low profile, we can turn it off. It's also monitored, so you can't open certain apps. However, you do have the ability to FaceTime your family at home over the Wi-Fi, or message or call or send updates to your family over Facebook Messenger or Instagram, or share Instagram reels with each other all the time. So it is good that you're not completely separated from the outside world. You still have that communications line open.
And if the Wi-Fi is turned off and you are keeping a lower profile, there are obviously different ways to communicate that keep things encrypted and safe.
Yeah, so I mean, the Wi-Fi is there for quality of life, kind of to keep you grounded while being away. Whereas as a communication specialist, my job is there to make sure the command team and the whole ship can achieve the mission that we go there for. So Wi-Fi completely separate. We can use our satellites and radios for the mission purposes in the long run.
Okay, so Ashleigh, the day of the missile test, you're not at your usual post due to clearing out of the danger zone. And who are you standing next to?
I ended up standing next to our ship's captain. When you see it in the movies and they're sitting in that important looking chair, exactly how it is in real life. They have one on the bridge and one in the ops room. So in the ops room, the operations room, standing next to the captain. When the phone rings, it's kind of like, Ash, can you grab that? And I mean, there is a little bit of nerves going on. Who is calling from external of the ship during a missile firing? They probably don't know what we're going through right now. So he picked up the phone and it was the commander of the US range that we're actually firing on. So wanting to know more of the details, how long until we're ready, the steps that we had taken, everything in the lead up to this firing.
How do you answer the phone out of interest?
Like you would answer any other phone. So HMAS Sydney, Able Seaman Hain speaking.
So convivial, so polite. And your heart no doubt skips a little bit of a beat because it's the US range commander.
A little bit there, but again, you're able to kind of separate it that he's not there physically. It's just this person on the phone, so you can get that intimidation out of the way a little bit, yeah.
So what sorts of things are you relaying in general terms?
Estimated time until we're ready, that everything is green or good to go, those kind of messages.
Right, and when it is green and good to go, is there a countdown?
I believe there was a countdown. So the countdown leading up to it, and then like missiles away. What we say is estimated time on top, so how long until it's supposed to reach its target, which as you introduced, it's quite a fast missile. So it didn't take too long, yes.
Is it loud when it launches?
It is not a sound that you expect to hear. So I would describe it as this deep noise, much like a swoosh. Think of how thunder rumbles through you, that it hits your core in a way that you can't simulate. Much the same, like even though you're inside this steel ship, quite a distance away from it for safety reasons, you can still hear it through the walls. So this big swoosh, and then watching it all play out through our camera system. It was very interesting.
Is it then designed to land somewhere in the ocean? What is the actual target point?
So we actually fired at a completely uninhabited small island. So no animals, no personnel, even trees. It's much like a grass mound. It was on the US range in the middle of the ocean. So it's a very controlled area. We know that no one's accidentally going to be there at that moment in time that we're firing. Very controlled, and we're able to kind of see it on the horizon through our camera system make impact with the land.
Well, Ashleigh, from the adrenaline rush of firing a missile to something quite different. 18 months ago, your life changed quite incredibly.
Yes, I had my daughter, little Poppy. 18 months old today. We've gone through quite a bit together, but she's amazing.
So extraordinary. Were you worried, as so many prospective parents are, that this new phase of life wouldn't be compatible with your career?
I think I have had the opportunity to work with quite a few people now, both mums, both dads, aunties, uncles, grandparents, that I knew there would be a place, but I would have to find it myself in some ways, decide what's best for my family now. And even at the moment, I work with some amazing parents who help me with simple things like, can you look after my daughter while I go and do this? Or, hey, I have some clothes that my kids have grown out of. Do you want them? You know, we lean on each other quite a lot. So we're almost like another community within the defence community of being able to lean on each other, and that sometimes you may be the first person experiencing something, but there's also others with similar experiences within defence, and we're trying to become more family focused, I believe, defence at the moment. So it definitely is working out for me right now.
So how do you achieve that impossible balance, life as a single mum and life in the Navy? What's the balance?
I am still finding it. Every day is something different. I work in quite a flexible workplace at the moment in that I do have work from home opportunities. However, it is nice being in the office, being able to socialise with others and not be mum at that time, but be leading seaman Ashleigh Hain. Yeah, finish the work day, pick up my daughter, go home, and then I'm mum instead of leading seaman Ashleigh Hain. So kind of going between the two titles most of the time, but still finding the ideal balance.
Now, this will surprise no one listening, but you actually recently received an award for your work during your regional deployment with the HMS Sydney. Tell me about that moment.
So all members that were on board during that deployment did receive this award, and it's such a incredible moment to say, you were here, you achieved this as a ship. Here's a special memory of that. Here's something to signify what that means to us. So I was fortunate enough to have my daughter there with me, who all the pictures, she looks teary and much like, why am I here? But nonetheless, it was quite a happy day that I could have work and family all in the one moment.
Such a special memory that Poppy's going to be able to grow up and look at the photos of that day and go, wow, look at what my mum has achieved. It's so inspirational. I've got a random question that I just have to ask. Is it true that people in the Navy can have tattoos?
Yes, it is. So, I mean, looking at me in uniform at the moment, you can't tell that I have any, but I do have about a dozen, quite small ones. We generally say like none on your hands and definitely not from your neck upwards. Everything else is hideable in uniform. And then, no offensive things like swear words or obscene imagery. But, most of us do have tattoos. And there's also a lot of tradition around tattoos in the Navy as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is that actually part of the naval tradition, tattoos?
Whether you want to follow it or not, different ones signify different points in your military experience. So, for example, I have a Hawaiian girl on the back of my arm, which I got in Hawaii. And the tradition around that is if you pull into Hawaii on a ship, you would get a hula girl. So that's exactly that one. You may definitely have seen the two swallows, the two birds before. You get those with how much of a distance you've travelled. So each one signifies a separate 5,000 nautical miles. But usually it's just the two and that's where you stop. So I do want to get those one day, just figuring out when having a toddler at home.
Just got to balance it. Now, Ashleigh, to finish, you've had the most extraordinary first 10 years of your career in the ADF, and you've been to some incredible places around the world, as we've discussed. Looking back perhaps to some of the tougher times for you growing up, if you could pass on a message to young Ashleigh, what do you think you would say?
I think I would say to younger Ashleigh, you will find people who will enjoy who you are that you don't have to change yourself for. Whether that's in the workplace or friendship groups, people will like you for you, and you don't need to fit to a certain standard to fit in. You'll learn it the hard way, but you will find that.
So you found your people in the ADF?
I think I did. And I will find them again in the future, and it's a good place to be.
Ashleigh, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening. To learn more about careers in the ADF, head to the link in the episode description and join us again soon for more incredible stories on How Did I Get Here?